right, sure. I think, yeah, let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. I don't know if folks have the agenda pulled up in front of them. It was emailed out, I think a couple days ago. But I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the agenda. If anyone is willing.
This is Jonathan. So moved.
All right. Any discussion or opposition? All right, then I think we can proceed. It looks like we've got starting off with an assembly report. I think we've got is Cameron on? Someone from the assembly? Thought I saw Cameron on earlier.
I'm not seeing Cameron at the moment, Mr. Chairman. We can come back to that if he does decide to join us, either he or Suzanne LaFrance. As the Assembly has reorganized, the Assembly's Budget and Finance Committee co-chairs are Assembly Member Suzanne LaFrance and Assembly Member Cameron Perez Padilla. So, and maybe Desiree might want to jump in from the Assembly office if she has any comments. Otherwise, we can come back.
Yeah. Anything you wanted to add, Desiree?
Just that we've done our 1Q budget revisions, as I'm sure you guys know. Like Lance said, Suzanne and Cameron are taking over for Budget and Finance, and we did a little pre-meeting yesterday about how they want to use Budget and Finance Committee here on out and see what kind of information that they want and what reports they're going to find beneficial. So we're still trying to plan things out and work around what those two think would be best for the committee. And there's just a lot of COVID-19 CARES Act funding, all of the relief funding. That's a big deal for the Assembly members right now. So we've got a lot of meetings and work sessions around those topics. We've got one tomorrow for the CARES Act. Yeah, just a lot of things where we're trying to figure out how to function during our COVID-19 emergency and how all of the money and budget stuff is going to work out.
Okay, thank you for that. I have been going, monthly to the Budget and Finance Committee meetings, and since COVID, I haven't heard even how the meetings are held or if they're held, and if there's still that expectation. I've kind of lost track of that. Should I be engaging with Budget and Finance? Is it meeting via Zoom or Teams or some other way?
Right, so the Budget and Finance Committee meetings are going to be held via Teams, like what we're on right now. Most of our committee meetings are being integrated and used via Teams. You are actually on the agenda for next week. I can send you the information. I was going to send out my general reminder email probably tomorrow. But you are on the agenda, and if you didn't attend, then that's no big deal. But you're more than welcome, like normal.
Okay. Thank you. Then let's see. With that, we've got Mr. Ratliff on, and can give us a little update on the school district.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're having our own response to the COVID-19 crisis as well, with schools being shut down since after spring break. From the financial standpoint, the board had reallocated $2 million to help address some of the distance learning things we're doing, and that includes buying wireless hotspots, new software, laptops, different types of addenda for creating online coursework. We've created food service sites, so we're feeding students every day. Anyway, you can go just pick up a meal regardless of income status. I don't think they're questioning anything. But we will have significant savings in other areas, such as substitutes, fourth quarter addenda for sports, activity buses that aren't being used. So we do have money to reallocate to do it. So it's not necessarily a a significant hit to the district financially, but we are having to do business differently. And then we did get the CARES Act funding, or we got our appropriation from the state. And if you want, we can wait and go over that via item 5 with Lance's CARES Act update. So, I mean, there's a whole lot of different stuff we're doing, but if you have any specific questions about it, we can certainly answer that. But from the finance aspect of it, I think we're doing pretty well, frankly, with the amount we've saved in some areas versus the amount we're having to spend to get distance learning going. And that, we don't really know the estimated cost of like summer school if we want to get a robust summer school to help kids get either credit recovery or just keep them up to speed versus, we usually have like a summer slide of kids when they go out in May even and coming back in August, that how far they've gotten further behind than they were. So just to help keep them caught up.
Okay. Yeah, I have to imagine your whole world has been in turmoil as far as the school district is concerned.
Yes, it's definitely different. For myself, and I have 3 kids, and a wife who also works, it's just trying to find the time to actually get my budget work done. So if you're teaching and trying to work from home, it's just it's certainly a different way of life, and you can really sympathize with other folks trying to do it too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
This is Carla, obviously. I wanted to ask Andy, I asked last time that I want to just ask again. You talked about activity buses not being used, but are you saying that your regular bus drivers are still being paid regardless of the fact that they're not transporting students at this time?
Yes, ma'am. All of our employees are actually being paid regardless of their work site location. And that's just the agreement that we have with our contractors and with the state. The state is going to continue to pay us with the understanding we're continuing to pay our employees. So it's really economic incentive, or I don't know if it's an incentive, but something to put money back into the economy by continuing to pay these employees. They're on call status, so if we need them to do anything, they will within 24 hours notice. And a lot of the bus drivers are actually driving around delivering curriculum materials to families and I think some like nursing supplies and lunches too. So they are being used, but not in the full capacity that we have them available.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Andy from the committee?
Yeah, through the chair. Andy, can you talk a little bit more about what some of the increased costs have been? You mentioned, I think, the platforms for online teaching and things like that. I was just kind of curious if you could talk a little bit more about that. I'm curious to understand the costs associated, increased costs in some cases associated with having to switch everything to online.
Sure. In the community with our internet service providers like ACS and GCI have offered either free internet or upgraded internet at no cost to families to be able to accommodate this. Some of the challenges we're seeing, though, is a lot of the families in the lower socioeconomic statuses have had GCI or ACS in the past and not necessarily left on favorable terms, so those providers aren't willing to even give them free access at this point. So we are spending several $100,000 on wireless hotspots. So that is just a physical device that we give to the students with preloaded data, similar like what a cell phone package would be. So we have to buy the equipment and the data packages with those. And additionally, just kind of determining the need for how many devices to give out to our students. I think we've given out around 10,000 Chromebooks to students to be able to borrow during this time. The majority of the ones we gave out were towards the end of life. So Chromebooks, I don't know if you're really familiar with them, after about 5 years, they stop updating the security protocols on them, so they're no longer anything we want on our network. They still function, but on our network they're not safe according to our standards. So we've given out the oldest ones first, so if we don't get them back, we're going to dispose of them eventually anyway, or pretty shortly. We had to pay addenda for teachers to create all this online curriculum because it is different, and to ramp up what they're doing. So those are some of the increased costs, and we'll have costs around our food service program that we're not even sure what will be reimbursed at this point, but we're going ahead and feeding the community anyway. So currently, FDA or USDA regulations, if we give a meal to a parent, that doesn't count towards reimbursement. So we're working through that. The CARES Act did allocate another $42 million to student nutrition programs, but we're not really sure what's going to be eligible under that funding and if it can come directly to us to support these meals we've already given out. Because that's $42 million statewide to include daycare providers, preschools, and other things that are not public entities.
Thanks, Andy. Appreciate it.
Yep.
All right. Other questions for Andy? Okay, hearing none, then I think we can move on to our OMB reports, and I think Lance has several items for us.
I do. And before we start, I just want to, for the record, a couple things, just to make sure that we have all of the Budget Advisory Commission members present. And I'm going to ask Lila just to verify those folks that are still on the line. So I'm going to ask Lila just to run through the list of people, and if so everyone knows who's online, just for the record. And I think Tasha may have joined us, so I want to make sure we capture everybody. So, Lila, if you could just walk through the list, please.
Yep. Tasha?
Tasha, did you join us?
No.
Okay.
Jonathan?
Here.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Nolan? Carla?
Here.
Lindy? Alyssa?
Here.
Jed?
I'm here.
Jimmy?
I'm here.
Lindsay?
I'm here.
Caitlin? Good. There she is.
Caitlin, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you now. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Caitlin.
Yeah, my apologies for being a few minutes late. I'm running from a work meeting. Glad to be here.
Thank you for joining us. And Assemblymember LaFrance, do I see you? Are those your initials, SL? No? Okay. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and run through some reports here for the Budget Advisory Commission. This was a topic, frankly, the first and the third topic were on our April meeting. And before we kind of get started, again, I want to reiterate what I sent in my email. It's unfortunate that we weren't able to get together, and it was just a matter of bandwidth. I think at least half of it on my end, just to get the BAC together, while at the same time I'm working to get the budget put together in OMB. We have been working remotely. Lila and Christine have been working remotely. Marilyn and I have basically been in the building working separately because we needed the technology here to get it done. So April was a little bit of a crazy month, and I also I'm helping the municipal manager with day-to-day activities inside the city while Bill Falsey is taking on the large responsibility as the incident commander at the Emergency Operations Center. And so we've been trying to pick up the pieces and make sure that things in the city business keep going well. So again, I appreciate your patience. Thanks for joining me today, and I think we'll be on track for these types of meetings for at least the next couple months. And I look forward to the day when we can get back together and have some coffee from Carla's shop. I'm looking forward to that. So the first, yay! So the first item I wanted to is at the end of every year we produce a budget to actuals report, and basically what this is, it is a quarterly report that shows how we ended 2019. So when we look at all of general government, we ended the year at 100.1% spent, and the big changes that we had were, while we knew that the police and the fire department were going to be running a little bit hot, the fire department did frankly a wonderful job trying to manage their expenses in their overtime, because we thought that they would be more over than that. We had many departments that underspent in 2019, and then the police department, they had a significant amount of overtime in their dispatch. And when we built the 2020 budget, we added non-sworn individuals that will be helping police in their dispatch. So their overtime, in a report from the Chief Dahl, their overtime is down, I think, by 40% through in February and March, and as they were able to bring folks on. So they had some overtime in those places. So but what I will say, I'm going to ask Lila to advance and go to the another report. So this is a report that we gave to the Assembly on April 14th. Can you blow that up a little bit, Lila, so we can see the top end of the table? Okay. So can I see the percent spent, the columns on the far right without that? Yeah. Okay. So what you see in this column here, I want to draw your attention to the two columns on the right. The two columns on the right are kind of how we ended. So what you're seeing is the bottom number where you see a $465,596. That is the amount that we were over in 2019, that $500,000. I'm going to ask Lila to point to a couple things. We knew that departments were underspending in every category except police and fire. As you can, I'm going to ask Lila to point to the 1.8, go up to fire. No, yes. So that's the fire department ended they overspent by 1.8. As you can see, their total budget is $101 million in 2019, and they had some things that were out of their control that they had to do their best to manage, and they did a very good job. So they ended up overspent. And then, Lila, if you could go down to police, right there. You see the police department, they have a $118 million budget, and they were about $3.3 million over. Now go up a couple, the 3.5. That $3.5 million, that is an expense that is related to a workman's comp and general liability expenses that we did not see until November. So all of the departments and their direct budgets, the money that they can actually manage, if we take out the workman's comp and general liability number and look at what all of the departments could manage, because our workman's comp and general liability, while we do our best when we do track it and we take steps to try to reduce those claims, there are times when we incur claims that go from year to year. That $3.5 million was not something that we anticipated at year end, and we didn't see until November. We were watching it, but we didn't anticipate that number would be that much. So at the end of the year, without that number, the thing that departments can control, everything that they could have controlled, we'd have ended under budget at 99.5%. So had it not been for those workman's comp, general liability, collectively all of the departments underspent. We had to make some adjustments for that. And then for police and fire, in order to true those dollars up, we had to provide an additional appropriations to the fire department and the police department. The Assembly approved that in April, and to make those departments whole. So the long and the short of it is that's where we ended in general government. The report also includes information about the utilities. I'll suffice it to say that overall in 19, their revenues were slightly up and their expenses were slightly down. But you can move on through the report if you'd like to do that. And when you get an opportunity to do that and you have questions, please let me know. I wasn't going to go into a whole lot of detail, but if you have questions on these, I just wanted to let you know how we ended 19. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, questions for Lance on this? Anyone have anything? All right, I'm not hearing anything then, Lance, so
Okay.
your next piece is, sorry, so yeah, go ahead and continue.
Thank you. I don't have anything else to add. Again, I will say the quarterly reports. One of the things that as Desiree was mentioned, we met with the leadership of the Assembly's Budget and Finance Committee, and we're going to continue to provide these quarterly reports to the Assembly. We'll be working with the controller this afternoon to sort of look at when the first report will be due to them. Just given the way expenses come in and the way revenues, the budget to actuals really relies on how revenues are coming in as well. So we'll be coordinating with Treasury and the CFO and the Assembly on when those reports. I think what's going to happen is that our first report to the Assembly will be probably late July, and it will be a second quarter report. We don't have a lot of data on the revenue side as of May, but we are keeping track sort of on our monthly expenses. But these reports that include all of the departments will be available to the Assembly. They're required that OMB report them to the Assembly by code. So that's just as a reminder. Okay.
Someone called in.
Did someone join us on the phone?
Yes, this is Cameron Perez Verdia. I just joined. Sorry I'm late.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Cameron. Mr. Chairman, that was Assembly Member Cameron Perez Verdia joined us on the phone.
All right, Cameron, let's see, do you want to, we glossed over the Assembly update on our agenda. Lance, could we break up yours and give Cameron a chance to give an update if he wants to?
Absolutely. I was ready to switch topics. Thank you.
Okay.
So you want me to give an update?
Yeah, sure. Anything fresh on the Assembly's agenda as far as what you're dealing with from a budget standpoint?
Well, thank you. Well, I didn't really prepare anything, so I apologize. Next time I'm attending, I'll make sure to come more prepared. I would say that Member Kennedy and I are new to chairing the Budget and Finance Committee, and we're both really excited to be in that role. And we have the opportunity to have our first meeting and spend some time really thinking about what the priorities and the focus of that committee should be. And we would really love input from your committee as well in terms of what you think the focus and the priorities over the next 12 months should be for that committee. So we're trying to be very thoughtful about making sure to use that committee's time and energy in a really valuable way. And then we also had, I think, this was mentioned, we have the opportunity to meet with Lance as well, and to begin to think about how we're going to shape those meetings. And so that's really probably the main update now is that we're getting ready to lay out a plan for how we're going to use those meetings over the next year. And we got some really great feedback from the administration, and I think that would be it. I'm looking forward to participating in this meeting, and we're looking forward to your guidance. And if there's anything that I can do to support all of you, please don't hesitate to ask. So that's probably the best I can do on short notice.
All right, excellent. Thank you for that. We may have, I think we may be discussing CARES funding coming to the Muni a little bit later, and
yeah.
it might be good to have you weigh in on that when Lance gets to it as well.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sorry, I misspoke. I said Member Kennedy. I meant Member LaFrance, and so just want to clarify that. But yeah, we did have an emergency meeting or a special meeting and had some conversation about the CARES funding as well, and so I'm happy to share what I know about that too. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, if you didn't see the note, Jimmy, as he mentioned earlier when he joined us, he had to step out. He had another obligation, so he had to step off the meeting.
Okay.
The next item on the agenda is I share with the in May of every year we do share with the Budget Advisory Commission our performance measures. Every department in the municipality has a set of performance measures that look as to how they are doing in providing the services that they are required to do. We sort of every department outlines its mission, its core services, what are the things that they anticipate to accomplish. And for Office of Management and Budget, we basically have three. Two of them are key to what we do every day, but one of them is related to the service that we provide. We are a service support organization in management and budget. Pretty much everybody in this building, whether you're in Treasury, Finance, HR, Legal, you're a support service department. You are not a direct service department, something like police, fire, streets, transit, library, where our measure of success and how well we're doing our job is based on how well our clients are being served. So what we do every year is we put out a survey, and I'm going to ask Lila to go to the next page. And this is the results of the survey from 2019. So it's a survey that illustrates how are we doing at the Office of Management and Budget in the things that we think that our clients are important. So what we do is we give them this list of questions in this table on the top, and if you look to the right side, there are, 6 questions, and the bars at the top, and then there are some additional questions at the bottom. And we send this to department heads, and we send this to budget coordinators in each of those departments. Every department pretty much has someone who manages their budget. There are individuals that work directly with us. This would include, the Assembly's office as well. And so we send it out, I think, I'm going to phone a friend here and ask Lila. I think we send it to 69 individuals. I think that's about the amount of people that we send it to. So directors, budget coordinators, people that work directly with us every day. And so this is the result of the survey, and I'll talk to a couple of these and not each one of these so you know how it's being illustrated. So the first one is OMB clearly communicates in its directions, expectations, and timelines. So when you look at that first one right there, the next you read across as to the results. So out of the 46 people that replied, 25 of them, or 45% total, felt that we strongly agree that that they supported that number. If you go over to agree, the green arrow is a comparison to how that performance measure compared to last year. So the green arrow means that the strongly agree number went up compared to last year's, since it's an annual survey. Our agree number went down, and so that could be contributed. Frankly, in this scenario, it seems pretty simple that number went down because the strongly agree went up. And then the rest of them, compared to last year, less people felt that our response was neutral, less people disagreed that we communicated, and even on our strongly agreed, that number went down. So the green means good, the arrow means the direction. So you can read this, and I will just summarize that overall, of the 5 people that we have in the Office of Management and Budget, when we talk to our customers, our directors, our budget coordinators, how do they feel, how we are serving them in the business we provide, this is what they think. And so take some time to look at this, and if you have questions about them, let me know. And again, the numbers and the arrows are a reflection of how that particular answers corresponds to the same question last year for 2019. I'm going to ask Lila to go down a little bit. So if you look at the bottom part of the graph here, the understanding of IGC's intergovernmental charges for maybe some new members on the committee. Intergovernmental charges are basically how we calculate our overhead. It's basically the cost of central services to support direct services departments. Do they understand that? Why are they being charged for legal services? Why are they departments being charged for payroll services? Why are they being charged for OMB services? And do they understand the methodology? So the top excellent one went down a little bit, and I mean it basically went down by 1. But as you can see, the overall quality of our service, and then how's our overall performance in general. And then we have the staffing figures at the bottom. So I'm pretty proud of my team. I think that overall 19 was a lot better than 18, and 18 was rough. As you recall, 18 was the year we implemented SAP. So when we had to build budgets and work through the transition of SAP from our old financial system to our new financial system, there was a lot of questions. There was a lot of need for information. Things had to be turned around a little bit more timely. So I'll say that our responses last year were not as favorable, in part because of what we were doing and working with departments and a new tool. But I will say that OMB has turned around, and our response is reflective of the businesses and the service we're providing. So that's all I have on this one, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Lance. Are there other questions for Lance as we're going along?
Yeah, this is Alyssa. Lance, I had a quick question. Do other departments have these kinds of metrics? Are their users, so to speak, are they kind of questioned in the same way? It seems like it's a really neat set of data. It'd be super cool to know if other departments have something similar. I know it'd be really difficult to say survey people on, ask the same questions of people when dealing with police or with fire, etc. But I'm just curious if any of the other departments have that kind of data.
All of the departments do. All of the departments have performance measures. We adjust them as times change, but they are also included in the budget document, the large, big budget document. It's part of each department. The only departments that, when I created this sort of survey question, some of our previous performance measures I didn't feel were very reflective of how well we are serving our customers. It was mostly widgets in and widgets out. How many documents do we approve? And that really doesn't mean anything if the documents are not helping. So the two departments that have similar responses surveys are HR, Health and Human Service, or our Human Resources Department. I've sort of turned this idea onto our Purchasing Department, again a support service, and IT Department. Basically those are the departments that, like us, we exist to support others, and if we're not serving our customers appropriately, that's good to know. Other departments, it's a little bit more direct when they have a policy. For example, snow plowing. If they had to snow plow in 96 hours and they got it done in, they got it done in 108, we want to know why. I think these performance measures, as I mentioned to the Assembly last meeting, was we report on all department performance measures quarterly. And we tell the Assembly that those things are available, and we post them. Actually, Lila makes them available effective the month after every quarter. So first quarter's performance measures from all departments are posted online. They're available. And I think it's going to be incredibly important in 2020 for the departments to do this for two reasons. We're going to be able to see how did a department perform in the first quarter of 2020, sort of pre-COVID. It's going to be very interesting to see how they report their performance measures in the second quarter, which is basically April, May, and June. A little bit of March is going to influence it. We're going to be able to look and see, while departments worked remotely, some of them were doing different tasks. How did the performance of their business change as a result of COVID-19? So I think it's going to be very interesting data when they present it for those departments that have these. I think it's going to be very interesting to see it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Thanks, Lance. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you for the question.
So, and Lance, is that information kind of made publicly? I mean, it's publicly available, but is it ever displayed as a dashboard or something that's kind of more consumable by the public? I've seen other municipal governments doing things like that, and more of a move towards putting some of their performance measures, key department performance measures, on an online, interface or a nice dashboard type of thing, or something like that. Has the Muni considered anything along those lines?
Yes, absolutely. As a matter of fact, we were looking at a tool through the IT department. It was called Open Data. We were working with Brendan Babb, and we have continued to do that. We probably will not use the Open Data technology, but we have been working with Brendan. It's just, to be quite honest, our ability to do that and get it available, I think, will be. Well, we were hoping it would be something we could do in 2020, and we were thinking about that early in the quarter. But I do think there's some important metrics that departments can see and just consolidate it in one place. But absolutely, yes.
Very cool. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Okay, that's all I have on this one. Let's go to what I thought I'd do, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, is I'm going to talk a little bit about, this is the document that the administration provided to the Assembly for the first quarter budget revisions. That the final document that was approved was amended. This is not the amended version. The amendments were pretty small, and I will describe those. The approved document that's amended is available on the OMB website, and I do believe it's also available on the clerk. When I was sending these to Lila, I didn't ask her to bring that one up. That's my neglect, not hers. But I will tell you that this is basically what happened. In summary, what we do when we do a first quarter budget revision is it's about a 3-month process, starting with the approved budget from November, and we go back and we scrub every single personnel change that might have occurred as a result of a bargaining unit, or any change in medical or change in their medical or grade changes. If a department wanted to move some of their non-labor to a labor budget and make a switch there where they want to upgrade an individual, we scrub all of that by reducing their non-labor and increasing their labor. And as a department, it's a net zero change unless there's a contractual requirement. But we scrub all of those things, and we make adjustments. We add any voter-approved bond debt that might have that was approved. This year, what we did is we took a very close look at fuel prices. Fuel prices have come down, so what we did is across the board, we adjusted the anticipated amount in which we expect to pay for fuel. So we reduced the general government's department's fuel budget collectively by, I think, about $800,000. We did not adjust the amount that they would consume, only amount that they would pay. We also, based on the direction from the administration, we basically reduced all of the travel budgets for all of the departments across the city. So there may be some travel later in the year, and if that's the necessary, and it's a required travel due to a job requirement rather than potentially an opportunity for an additional professional training, those will be measured individually, and departments will have to request to move their non-labor budget to make those adjustments and then get approval for those. If travel is grant funded and it doesn't affect the property tax dollars, then those will be evaluated and then assessed as well. Any judgments or settlements that we had last year, we at the end of the year, we add those into the budget, and then we make some realignments. And then when we built the budget, we looked at revenue projections as a result of changes in contributions from our utilities, alternative to property taxes, which is the utilities contributing basically a service assessment from either the utility or the enterprise, and those are inside the tax cap, so the more money we get from there, it reduces the amount of property taxes we collect. So the other thing that we did in this budget is we assumed that in 2020 the transaction of MLMP will occur. We considered it as part of 19, but we decided that there was a lot of unknowns in 2020. We know that the RCA has a deadline to provide a ruling on May 28th as to their approval or not of the sale of MLMP to Chugach Electric. We believe that that decision will be made to the affirmative. So knowing that, we also made the budget assumption that the transaction will actually be done and occur effective July 31st. If the day changes one way or the other, the budget will have to change one way or the other. Without going into too much detail, one of the residuals of the sale of MLMP is that the Eklutna power plant, we will continue to own the Eklutna power plant, and the power will be sold to MEA and Chugach Electric. So that will be a remaining asset to the municipality that will be managed by the municipality. So we separated that power plant is currently part of MLMP, and as part of the agreement was that we would keep that piece and everything else would go to Chugach. That is what the RCA knows. That's what they're considering. They're considering that in their ruling. CEA knows that. MEA knows that. So there are no unknowns in that arena there. So the other thing that we did is we adjusted the PFD amount. Normally when we project a PFD receipt for municipality, there are typically garnishments to people. If people receive a PFD and they own the state money for child care support or other legal required payments, their PFDs are garnished. We are in line in that garnishment process after the state, and so typically we get a little bit of receipt of that. We budgeted $1,600 PFD in the approved budget. In the 1Q, we reduced it to $1,000, which reduced the net reductions there. But when we take all of the revenue assumptions, when we did this in February or March, in early March, the total net increase in revenues was about $6.7 million collectively. This does not include the effect on revenues as a relate of COVID. I mean, it was literally, they were passing at the same time. So we built the budget based on what we knew on the revenue sides and the expenses sides. We also told the Assembly, and they are aware, and we are working with it, that with the result of the CARES Act and how the receipt of those funds could not only cover unknown expenses inside our operating budget, they could also potentially be looked to, support our budget in other ways. So that is a lively conversation on how we're going to progress into 2020 in our budget. So I'm going to ask Lila to scroll down. I'm going to stop there, and then I'm going to switch gears, and I'm going to ask Lila to open up a presentation that I gave the Assembly that kind of highlights what I just talked about and how it affects mill rates.
And Lance, I think you might have caught yourself from saying to replace revenues, perhaps.
Well, I think the reason I say that is because as early as today, there is legislation being presented in Congress asking Treasury to modify the rulings and the frequently asked questions that would allow potentially that states and local communities can use CARES Act money to for revenue reimbursement. There are caveats. It has to be, it can't be recovery based on poor management and unbalanced budgets or numbers that are, unjustified. So I know that our congressional delegation particularly, I think a couple other states that are equally impacted by loss of revenues, that might be available. There may be some restrictions that you can't do it for use of lost property tax revenues, but there may be an opportunity to use it for lost non-property tax revenues. There are many communities that are affected by sales tax, loss of sales tax revenues. Anchorage is not in that situation, but many jurisdictions in the state are. So the reason I'm choosing my words carefully is because, as I mentioned earlier, the rules of engagement are not done. And so we are waiting for that to occur before we make our decisions for the remainder of 2020.
Right. And I think, so that could be, that's a really big issue, the revenue replacement for places that depend on seasonal sales tax, especially, or seasonal bed tax. And I know that we do to some degree, but it's especially bad for, Ames or Skagway or, places like that get their tax base from a seasonal industry, essentially.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the reason why our congressional delegation and I think there were 6 others supporters bipartisan in requesting Congress to have the Treasury Department review the current rules. All right. I'm going to highlight a couple slides here. I'm going to not go through each one of these. This is a presentation I gave the Assembly that talked about how we built the original budget and the budgets that we changed. So this material for many of you should look very familiar because it is the material that we shared with the Budget Advisory Commission and I used to remind the Assembly what we did in 2020. So I'm going to ask Lila to just walk through some of these slides. So I'm going to stop right there. We talked about year end. We talked about our revenues. We ended fund balance in a negative position. When we overspent in police and fire, it put our fund balance in a negative position. So we had to recover for that when we built 21. So that's an important piece to note. Go ahead, Lila. Again, our priorities in the approved budget and in the 1Q budget are the same as in the approved. Go ahead, Lila. This is how we built a 2020 approved budget. We had some labor obligations. We had some non-labor obligations and contracts. Our debt service was down, so in 2020 we had a $5.9 million budget that we had to fill. Go ahead, Lila. So in 2020, when we built it, not as part of 1Q, these were the things that we dealt with. We added public safety money, we added money to homelessness, and we added a little bit of money to property appraisal, fleet, transit, so they could provide a new route, payroll auditors, and some money to the health department. That was all part of the approved budget. We didn't make any of we didn't change any of that in 1Q. Lila? So these were the things that we did look at when we were doing the first quarter budget revisions. The state budget, the governor was still working on some of those things, some of the changes that we had affect. One of them was municipal assistance. We did not change our municipal assistance amount. The approved budget had $4.6 million. The first quarter budget assumes we are going to get $4.6 million. So it might be in a different form, but we did assume that that money would be coming in. The first thing that we do when we build a first quarter is we rebalance and maintain our fund balance reserves. As a reminder, we keep a 10% savings account of the amount that we spent the previous year. We also keep a 2% in reserves for any emergencies, for example, like COVID or special election. We make sure that that money's reserved. These numbers are very important when we go to the rating agencies to preserve our rating. So the first thing we do is shore up our savings account. So that $4 million deficit that I mentioned from that overspend in 19, the first thing we have to do is shore that up and make that up, and we did in 1Q. And as part of the first quarter revisions, I said our revenues were up. We did have overall direct costs, expenses going up, and I'll highlight some of those. And then the overall tax need, the mill rates went up in the first quarter by $1.2 million. Lila? This is just a reflection when we make adjustments, how much have we added over the years since 2015? How much have we added in first quarter revisions for that directly relates to our first quarter budget? And then you can see that the number has been going down. The key reason that 1Q went down, I can verify this, two things happened. Marijuana, I think, came under the cap. The other thing is the residential property tax exemptions from 20 to 50 kicked in first quarter of 18. Those influenced the number going down a little bit. And then you can see in the first quarter, to balance the budget, we add 1.2. And then at the bottom, you can see where some of the key adjustments were made. Lila? So in the first quarter budget revision, in the detail tab on the assembly document, there is line by line of each one of these items. I'm just going to highlight some of these things. So the first item is a contribution from the MOA Trust. We recalculated when we, again, assumed the sale of MLMP. We are going to do two big things with the proceeds. One, we're going to pay off MLMP debt. And two, and we can pay off other municipal debt, but definitely MLMP debt. The other is we're going to put the balance of those into the existing municipal trust. When we put the money into the trust, we draw a return on that invested trust by 4.25%. This is the amount of increase we will expect to receive in the trust for 2020, $3.2 million. And then a balance of some contributions from MLMP for IGC. So basically, there will need to, when the MLMP transaction happens, right now we charge MLMP for the services of all the intergovernmental services. There needs to be a contribution from the proceeds of the sale after the sale occurs to keep those processes going while we close and balance all of the support for MLMP. That number and all of those activities will get readjusted when we rebuild 21. But it is an important part of the support of the expenses. We had some settlements we had to recover for, so those are revenue increases. Those revenue increases will be as part of the tax cap. And then we had some other adjustments. These numbers we primarily get from public finance and treasury. And then going down on the bottom, we talked about some revenue decreases. This is a reflection of the PFD going down. Tobacco tax, the amount of tobacco that we anticipate and receive in tobacco is going to be down about $700,000. The total amount of tobacco taxes we get is roughly $20 million, so it'll be down about $700,000. That's a projection from our friends in Treasury. We do expect the fuel excise tax, the amount of receipt in the fuel tax, to go down, and the motor fuel tax to go down. I'll remind us that tobacco, fuel, and motor fuel are all under the cap. So when those numbers go down, when we tax to the cap, the property tax numbers could go up. The good news is, if you go, I'm going to ask Lila to go to the top, that the MUSA and MISA payments, those revenues came in higher. So those also influence the tax cap. So if we take the MUSA and MISA, that number went up, which is good, but then when tobacco fuel and motor fuel went down, that's bad. But the net effect is there's about a $200,000 adjustment towards property taxes, because tobacco and fuel basically net out. The loss in revenue there are netted by the gain in revenues in MUSA and MISA. Does that make sense? That's a lot. That's a lot to digest. All right. Without going through each one of these, but these were the changes we had to add to the budget. We talked about the settlements. We talked about the workman's comp, general liability, a variety of other things. The administration added a position in GIS, and that one's primarily paid by the port. We added a position back in IT, in the I-team, and then we added another payroll position. Both the I-team and the payroll were taken out in the approved, and the administration committed to try to add those back in, and we did. The Assembly supported that. And then these are the reductions in costs. These are the things that reduced our spend. So collectively, that's about $3 million. So we get to a total direct adjustments from cost expenses and cost loss and decreased to about $1.1 million. So here's the money page. When we built 2020 and we approved it in November, it was $540 million. The first quarter budget adjustment we proposed to the Assembly was 5.41. The position count changed. Most of that had to do with scrubbing. The only positions that were added as a result of the first quarter budget were the I-team, the payroll, and the one GIS position. But since November, some departments decided that they had a result of scrubbing. They wanted to make some adjustments that were approved. So the net effect was basically, 9 positions. So the tax base number went up by 1.2 when we presented it to the budget. We presented it to the Assembly. And I'm going to ask Lila to go to the next slide. Okay. One of the things that we did when we submitted it to the Assembly is we did not include, because we needed some information, Proposition 9. Proposition 9, if you recall, was a proposition to ask the voters to assess themselves for the purposes of leasing emergency medical systems equipment. We needed to work with the department to find out, did they need all of that money in 2020? The voters approved it. It's about an $830,000 annual special service assessment to the taxpayers for area-wide to support EMS medical leasing of equipment. The voters approved that. I think it was about a 60% approval rate. But what we didn't know when we gave this to the Assembly was, did they need it all in 2020? Did we have to tax for it all in 2020? So in the S version, that's not this one here, we found out that the answer to that question was yes, we did. So what we had to do in the S version for general government is the amount of money that we had to adjust, where it says the 2020 1Q preliminary at 8.97. This did not include Prop 9. When we did include Prop 9, Lila's going to go over to the next, the plus 0.09 actually turned out to be plus 0.12. So the cost per 100,000 when the Assembly approved the budget, instead of being $897 per 100,000, it was $900. We added $3 per 100,000 with the approval of that. So the bottom, so that changed general government slightly. Then the next bar, and I'm going to sum up really quick, is this is a breakdown of what, when the school district budget was approved, their last year's mill rate, they were at 7.16. There was no additional request for tax adjustment to deal with the state of Alaska bond debt. That didn't occur last year. There was a lot of talk about what happens if the legislature, decides not to provide school bond debt reimbursement, because if they decide not to do that, it's going to affect the 2020 mill rate. Well, if you look at this slide, what happened here is the district did a very good job, as much as they possibly could, to absorb some of that debt, but there was still $16 million that the taxpayers need to recover for. So when we added that in, the regular day-to-day operations of the school districts, their mill rate went from 7.16 to 7.27 for a total increase of 0.11. So their mill rate went up about the same amount as general government when we adjusted for general government. So the two of those would have been about $23. However, we added the school district bond debt reimbursement. That increased the mills by 0.48. So that made the school district's portion of the mill rate adjustment a total of 0.59. So $48 of that $59 is for school bond debt reimbursement. So we added that in when we set the mill rate, as we needed to do to recover for that lost bond debt. And depending on what happens with this session and what we do with the CARES Act money and how that is going to influence what it looks like in when we set the mill rates next year. So the total amount of cost per 100,000 for the city and the district turned out to be $1,675, because we added 3 when we did the S version. But generally, that's what happened. Does that make sense, and do you have questions?
Yeah, any questions for Lance?
Again, there's a lot of detail in the stuff that I sent you, so take a look at that. And then we'll go on to the next slide. I'll just say, for the utilities, we made a little bit of an adjustments for the water utility. In the approved budget, they had a rate increase, I think, of 5% or 3%. The RCA since ruled on that and did not support that total rate increase. So we had to reduce the amount of that to reflective of the RCA's decision. So those were the adjustments in the appropriation amount. So that's what happened on the water side. They were looking for a rate increase on water. Made some adjustments there.
Reason?
Pardon me?
What was the RCA's reason for the lack of, for not approving the rate increase, if you happen to know?
I don't know. Was that Alyssa?
Yeah, sorry.
No, yeah. If you ask a question, it'd be great if I could just say your name so I know, and then the record. Alyssa, I do know. I just don't remember.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We talked about what happens at ML&P. When we built the budget, we built it like we own a utility for 12 months. We adjusted the budget, so we're going to own the utility for 8 or 7. That was the change there. Really, some minor changes in the port, and we adjusted a little bit in the solid waste. The biggest change in solid waste was a capital improvement for the landfill. Okay? These are all of the things that we talked about. We're going to talk a little bit remaining here in the next 20 minutes, and I'm going to summarize, and then Lila, go ahead, Lila. So all of this stuff happened while we were all working remotely. The Assembly approved this stuff on the 28th. The Treasury has set the mill rates. They are sending out the invoice, the notices. They are due by code out the 15th, a week from tomorrow. One of the things that, if you are not aware, the Assembly, with the administration's recommendation and the Assembly support, we moved the date in which, right now tax bills are due in June and August. The Assembly moved those dates to July and September. There'll be no penalty for those that need to pay. Most people, their tax bills are part of their escrow account. They'll get paid in June, but for those that are not, and they pay them in July, there'll be no penalty. Okay. So that was, I think, 20 minutes worth of explanation of 4 months worth of work. I'm going to move on the agenda, Mr. Chairman, if you have, unless you guys have questions.
Yeah, are there any questions for Lance before he moves on? Okay, keep going, Lance.
Okay, so the next item is, pardon me, you do not have a handout of these, and I can send them to you, but when we stood up the Emergency Operations Center that's located off of Arctic Boulevard, is our regular Emergency Operations Center, we turned that on, put it in effective March 12th. When we turn that on, we start tracking our expenses for everything related to an emergency. In the event that, with the anticipation that we will get reimbursement from FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. So what we do is we start tracking those expenses. And until we can set up a separate pot of money for those charges to go to, departments consume their approved operating budget. Similar to the earthquake, we want to keep the expenses of an emergency response separate from day-to-day operations. So one way we do that is we pull money out of our cash reserves, we populate a fund that's specifically used and only for activities related to and procurements, whether it's labor or consult or contract services. These are where the costs for the emergency shelter at Ben Boeke and Sullivan and the Dempsey and all of the personal protection equipment that we need to purchase, all of the support services to the Emergency Operations Center, and all of the activities related to that, in which the municipality is responsible for. We set up a fund to do that. Similar to the earthquake. So we created 2 emergency appropriations. The first happened in late April, and we set aside $3 million because we did not know how much we were actually going to need and how fast we were going to actually spend. But what we did know is we had already incurred $2 million worth of expenses in about the first 30 days. These were either commitments to contracts that were already done. So we had to cover we wanted to make sure, so we moved the expenses from the department's operating budget to this fund. We track that weekly. The Assembly receives a report every other week on the procurements that we are actually doing. So we work with the Emergency Operations Center to find out what kind of contracts are they committing to, how much are they costing, how fast are they spending them, and what is the labor cost, and who's doing it. So we keep track of that to make sure that the fund is appropriately, I guess, has the appropriate amount of money in it with some justification and reason, rather than we don't know how long this is going to take, just give us as much as you possibly can. That's not how we're operating. You have to justify not only what you are spending and how much you are going to spend, because we told the Assembly when we did the first $3 million, we're going to do another one, and we may do multiple. But until we can back that up, we're going to start with 3. Well, as we went through March and April and look into May, we know that we have committed at least $8.5 million and spent another $2 million. So that was easily $11 million, which rapidly overcame that 3. So we added another $12 million last Tuesday night for a total of $15 million. So So we're keeping track of those expenses. I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a heads up. I think the Assembly will hear this tomorrow. We put in a reimbursement for $9.5 million on Monday, based through our expenses as of the 28th of April. So we expect that reimbursement to come back to the city forthwith. So that will be good. I will point out that of the $12 million that the Assembly appropriated out of our cash reserves into this fund, there is $1 million set aside to support a small business grant program. It will be basically I don't know all of the details, but it's $1 million for 100 small businesses at $10,000 apiece. They will be selected at random, and that will be there will be more information on that piece. This is not something new that we are doing. It's something that other communities are doing, and we are assured that 100% of that $1 million is reimbursable from the CARES Act. The other thing is that the Assembly and the administration set $1 million of that $12 million set aside for rental assistance. We have individuals who are not able to pay their rent, or landlords are, they can't receive their rent from their residents. Again, there is a program that already exists. I think it's managed through the United Way, and that will basically put a cash infusion into that program right away. So departments, people that are seeking rental assistance can tap into that program. Those $1 million are set into basically a separate account. They can be tracked separately, but they will be a grant program to manage those. So the documents are available online. If you want them, let Lila know. She can send them to you. But thanks to the support of the Assembly, we were able to do this. We only projected out till May. We also know that some of the contracts that we've encumbered, we probably won't spend it all. Or if we do, it may be as a result of if the curve reverses and we see a lot of more cases, we have contracts in place to respond rapidly. If it doesn't, then we won't spend it. So that's what's going on with the emergency appropriations.
Lance, that business program, that grant program, I've seen it labeled as a pilot. Does that mean that they might allocate more money to business relief?
That's exactly what it means. Okay. I will add, if Assemblymember LaFrance is not on or Cameron is not on, I will just say that the administration reports to the Assembly on what these encumbrances are for. We are working to provide additional information about exactly what those dollars are being spended, and they have particular questions or interests on some of them more so than others. And so we are working to provide that. Obviously, it's information if the Budget Advisory Commission is also interested in, we can certainly provide that to you as well. It's all public information. So that's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, this is Cameron. I just wanted to add that we had this very discussion when this funding was approved, and the advice from the administration was that they believed that this initial money was going to get burned through pretty quickly. And I think all members of the Assembly are under the assumption that we'll come back to this and have another discussion as to whether to put more money towards this in the near future. But there's no doubt that there's a significant amount of need, and that the information that we've been getting from small businesses is this is a good start, but will likely the need will continue to be there, and so we'll have to have that conversation soon as to whether to put more funds into this pot.
Okay, excellent.
All right, shall
I want to toss out one other thing too. So I'm part of the economic resiliency task force that the mayor called together. That's chaired by Bill Popp and Julie Soppe, and I've been wondering how much interaction is the assembly having when it comes to especially like CARES funding. Like how much interaction is the assembly having with that group? I'm not seeing as much crossover as I would expect.
Suzanne, do you want to speak to that? I have not interacted with them, and I would very much like to, but I don't know about other members of the assembly. Suzanne, are you on, and can you respond to that as well?
Hi, can you guys hear me now? This is Suzanne. Can you hear me?
I hear you.
Okay, I dropped off of Zoom and I'm dialed in, and it's a little bit sketchy on my end. I can hear most, but the reception's not great. So the question about the ERTF and the Assembly's participation, I was on a meeting with Girdwood a few weeks back and have had some conversation with Bill Popp, and I know Crystal Kennedy was also involved with a conversation with the Eagle River ERTF, but otherwise my involvement has been minimal and mostly through Chris Schutte. So that's an area where, as we talk about the COVID-19 relief money, and as we expect to discuss the rules to change, we want to get more direct feedback from the ERTF. So that's a follow-up item.
Okay. So and I bring this up too. It is probably an important issue because the group has a lot of interaction with the mayor. But whenever we bring up the issue of the Muni CARES funds, we Alex Slivka and Chris Schutte are often on and say that there's no plan, we don't know how to spend it yet, we don't have the guidance from Treasury, so they really can't say very much about it. But I'm kind of hearing here that there's maybe more in the works with that, so I'm just it's a little bit of a disconnect.
Yeah, this is Cameron. We certainly are. We're learning more each day, but we're as a body, we're still in what feels like a stage of still trying to interpret what the guidance is and trying to figure out how to apply that. And so, from the assembly end, it's going to be on the agenda. Of our next finance committee meeting. We discussed it. I think was mentioned at our special meeting. But even at that meeting, the guidance we got from the administration is that they still don't have real clarity yet in terms of what the boundaries are and how that can be spent. But we're hearing more information is coming, and so we expect to hear soon a plan or a draft plan from the administration in terms of what their thoughts are and how they're going to apply that.
Sure. Yes. Thank you for that. Now, having stirred up that dust, I actually am going to have to leave the call a couple minutes early. I don't know if you guys probably can continue to wrap things up without me, Lance.
Yeah, just turn it over to Alyssa if she's still on, and then I don't think I'll have much to add on this next one because, as Cameron mentioned, we're still rolling here on the CARES Act.
Okay.
Hey, and we'll follow up, Nolan. Our next meeting is scheduled for June 4th, and then we have a meeting on July 2nd, but I'm going to ask Lila to ping you guys and see if you want to do it on July 9th.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you for that. And I am going to go ahead and sign out, but I appreciate all this information, Lance. There's a lot of good stuff in here. And thanks for joining us, Cameron and Suzanne.
Hey Nolan, Suzanne here. I'd like to get with you offline since I couldn't speak for most of the meeting. So I'll shoot you an email, okay?
Sure, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
All right. In the last 5 minutes, Madam Chair, I think what I'll do is I'll do the best I can to summarize what we do know and what we don't know about the CARES Act. I will just say that we know there's more that we don't know than we do know. And I'll try to summarize it this way. The CARES Act it's a federal action, and the way that we should be looking at it as the CARES Act created funding I'll try to characterize it in three different categories. One category that's relevant to us. One category is they provided dollars to federal agencies. They provided money to the Department of Transportation, to the Department of Education, Department of Justice, the Treasury Department, Department of Commerce, and then each one of those departments are setting up their own rules and guidelines on how these monies can be spent. Also in the CARES Act, so we have an opportunity to tap into each of those. We know that Merrill-Field has been approached to receive some dollars that can be used for operating and or capital, but there's some guidance on that. The Transit Administration has provided some potential additional resources to us and the railroad. We have to figure out how we share those resources. There's grant opportunities that the fire department is actively seeking. The police department is actively seeking. So we're rallying those pieces together as it's coming on and as the opportunities come forth, and then we understand what we can and can't do with the money, and then what we should and shouldn't do with the money. The second sort of category of money inside the CARES Act, as I see it, is additional money to FEMA. While FEMA is its own agency, it's been given resource money to actually cover the expenses of a disaster, in this case, COVID. So there's resources that are, and we are tapping into those resources to replenish the money that we borrowed in the emergency appropriations for the operations of the EOC, the operations of the Ben Bokean Arena. We're going straight at those for FEMA money. The small business thing that we talked about earlier, the rent assistance, that's going to come from one of the departments, whether it's Housing and Urban Development or Department of Commerce. Those will come from the federal agency. And then the third category of money is CARES Act money that went directly to states. So the governor received the state of Alaska received $1.25 billion. The state is then responsible for allocating a certain percentage of that, 45%, to local communities and 55% to the state. That's also CARES Act money that's coming to us from the state. The governor has some say on how that money and how much is coming to Anchorage. So we're learning on all three of those categories. And so originally, the governor, in the last category, the governor had proposed to give Anchorage $156 million. That was the proposal to the legislature, how we would get. There was a lot of immediate reaction and planning on, we're going to get 156 and we're going to spend it on this, this, and this. What we didn't know was, one, was it going to be 156? And two, what was going to be the governor's and the legislature's application to that? They may have given that money to us as an increase to municipal assistance by formula, and we would have to use it, or maybe there were some requirements on what we had to do for bond debt reimbursement, or that it had to be targeted a percentage to homelessness. All of that was still in play. So that's still in play. The FEMA money, the second, that's pretty clear. I mean, that's where we're going to be reimbursing for our FEMA. And then there's these opportunities from Treasury, as Chair Clouda mentioned. What can and can't we use it for? What should and shouldn't we use it for? Those rules are still being established. So we are gathering all of that information on how it's going to not only affect the government, but how, and the state and Anchorage, but how it's going to affect our partners in the community. How is it going to affect the tourist industry? You know, is there something in the Department of Transportation that we can infuse in construction? How can we do that? Are there any strings attached? There's a lot of leniency on reporting requirements and overhead requirements and timing requirements and bidding requirements. So when we know all of those things, we know better how to tactically and strategically put this money to use right away. The Assembly and the administration, we're going to take every opportunity to put that money to the places where it's needed the most as fast as we possibly can. And so, but it makes sense to, in my analogy, is to aim, point, shoot, rather than shoot, point, aim. Because if you do that, you may put yourself in a situation where you're spending money that's not eligible, you're spending money that's not reimbursable, and you're not following the rules. And when we get to the audit and we get to the reimbursement for showing what you actually spent it on, because it's not without responsibility for eligibility and proving it. It's just a lot of money with a different rules of engagement. So this CARES Act money is all, we know there's a lot of money, but what we don't know is what's the end result about what we're going to have to what we can and can't use it for. So there's going to be more about this that we're talking to the Assembly tomorrow between 1 and 3. Obviously, those are, you can call in, you can listen in on those things. Material that will be available, I can forward that to the Budget Advisory Commission, but that's about as much as I have to offer right now on the Federal CARES Act. It's literally going to be an influence on how we balance 2020 and how we build 21. It's going to make a big difference. So I hope that made sense, as simple as I possibly could.
Thanks, Lance, and this is Alyssa. So the only question I have, I guess, is when do you expect to be getting more guidance, if you have any idea? Because aim, point, shoot is obviously the way we want to go with this. How does that impact our ability to be responsive and to really care for people quickly enough to, help businesses not go under and people not go hungry and all of those sorts of things?
Excellent question. So the guidance doesn't come in, it's coming in pieces. And for example, as I mentioned, we know from the Treasury Department, and they're not going to change their mind, and we don't have any sense, we're pretty positive, pretty convinced the Treasury is not going to change their mind about if we send money through a grant program to support small businesses, they're going to say that's not eligible. They've already told us that's the case. This issue about whether or not we could use some of the CARES Act money to shore up some of our revenue, and if we can, what are the rules? What are the ways that we do that? We don't know that yet, so that's a piece. The FAA or some of these other monies, the DOT money, it's like, you can use it for payroll, you can use it for construction, you can go right away and get it done. You can't, but you should pick projects that are in your capital budget, because what we're doing is, the purpose of the money is to accelerate your plans, not create things that aren't part of your approval at a state or local level. That's pretty simple. That we have. So as the information comes in, some decisions we can make right away with strong confidence. Some of them I think we're going to hold off on until we have done everything we can to provide as much opportunity as we need right now. So hopefully that answers your question.
That does. Thanks so much, Lance.
Yep. And I know
Any other questions? Oh.
I think we're losing members because we're after hours there, but anyway, I don't have anything else. Thank you.
Anybody else have questions for Lance about CARES Act funding?
Hey, this is Jonathan. I don't have a question, but I just want to say that this has really been a really great presentation, and I mean, a huge lift clearly for Lance, who's done a lot of talking. So I just wanted to express my thanks to the team for a really, really effective and weighty 90 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jonathan. I'm just Jerry Maguire on this. I just deliver it. There's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes to make it happen. There is no doubt. There's Marilyn, Courtney, Christine, and Lila. There's just no way on the budget side it happens without them. And Desiree, down in her shop, helping me navigate through the assembly. A lot of support there too. I appreciate her as well.
When you said, you made this comment in the middle about that there's 4 months worth of work in 20 minutes. And as a consultant, man, that just so rang true to me. Like, yeah, here's a year's worth of labor that I'm going to summarize for you in 30 minutes with questions, right? So I appreciate the labor that goes in behind it.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Carla, did you have a question?
No, I just accidentally unmuted, but I do love you, by the way. Just wanted to let you know.
Thank you. I realized I was wearing it after the fact. Awesome. Any other questions for Lance? I know we're a little over, but it's important stuff. Wanted to make sure everybody's got a chance to ask questions. All right. Seeing none. Can we get a consensus on next scheduled meeting? So next scheduled meeting is June 4th, and then July 2nd. We're considering July 9th. How does, if everybody can look at their agenda real quick, how do those sound to folks? Are we okay for the June 4th?
Yep, that works for me. This is Jed.
Both of those work for me. This is Lindsay.
Thank you, Lindsay. Okay. Perfect.
Thank you.
All right, we'll keep you updated. Always ask questions. We have a new assembly member, as many of you know, Jamie Allard, the representative of Eagle River, and so she's a new face on the assembly. And the other members, we had 6 assembly seats. 5 were the incumbents won, and then we have one new member, Assembly Member Dyson, who I'm going to miss dearly on the assembly. Fred brought a lot of spirit and color to the assembly. I've known Fred a long time. I'm going to miss him on the assembly. He's a great guy.
All right. Motion to adjourn.
This is Jed, so moved.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you both. All right. Have a great afternoon, everybody. Stay safe.
Thank you, Alyssa.
See you next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for all your work. Really appreciate it.
Bye.
Yeah, thanks so much, Lance. Thanks to you and your team, and you guys stay safe.
Thank you.